I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. So said famous author Charles Dickens, author of A Christmas Carol, and so does DePaul University. Hi, I'm John Cicero, and we're here at the Richardson Library at DePaul University, where we're going to take a look at Charles Dickens' famous works and other rare books. Hi, Kathryn.
Hi, John.
We're here with Kathryn DeGraff of the Special Collections and Archives. Kathryn, you have a fantastic Charles Dickens collection. Can you tell us a little bit about what you have here?
Love to. We've got about 1,000 volumes of Dickens' rare books and memorabilia, and what we have here this afternoon are some of the very early editions of A Christmas Carol. This is a copy of the very first edition of A Christmas Carol, printed in 1843. Right after Dickens first wrote the story. I'm opening it carefully to an illustration of Scrooge seeing Marley's ghost on that Christmas Eve that begins his journey back into the past, present, and future. This next edition was printed some years later, but the owner of the book had the binding made to replicate one of the illustrations in that first edition of Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig and their ball back in Scrooge's past.
Wow, that's beautiful.
The 1860 first American edition of A Christmas Carol, and it's also interesting because it's the very first edition that has an illustration of the Cratchit's family Christmas dinner. And last on this table, but by no means least, is a volume from the 1920s illustrated by Arthur Rackham, who did a lot of illustration of fairy tales and fanciful tales. And here we see Scrooge being transported back to Christmas past by those same spirits, but we also see Scrooge meeting with Bob Cratchit the morning after Christmas back in the office. You can see from these early volumes that there was a great deal of attention focused on illustrating so that the readers would have not just the text, but an image to go along with it. On the next table, John, we have more of the illustrated editions of Christmas Carol from the collection. And in those books and in the story of A Christmas Carol, we begin to see the restoration of Christmas traditions to Victorian England. Those Christmas traditions had been banned by the Puritans. You weren't supposed to eat mince pie. You weren't supposed to have a feast. No businesses were closed on Christmas Day. It was a solemn day of church-going and observance of religious rituals and not all of the fun things that we think of Christmas today.
That's fascinating.
So what Dickens did in the family, the Cratchit family, and in the character of Tiny Tim, he really restored the idea of family values and of a family meal and of a restoration of family connections during this time. Of course, one of the centerpieces of that, as was part of the stages of the Victorian Christmas, was the feast, the roast turkey, the roast goose, but more importantly, the idea of charity, of giving to the poor, of understanding that those who don't have as much as we do need to be paid attention to. So it's a question of memory, a question of family, a question of remaking Christmas for a more urban society, and a question of establishing those traditions in a way that could be passed on to children and grandchildren in the same way that these books have gone from one generation to another.
So what do we have here? Looks like you guys have some fascinating items.
In addition to reinventing Christmas traditions for an urban, modern audience, Christmas Carol and Dickens and the Victorians began the idea of commercialization. And so we have a number of different objects that are links between Christmas Carol and selling, which is really what Christmas has become and means to so many of us in this day and age, as well as family and feasting and charity and all the rest of it.
So it was really the beginnings of Black Friday then.
I think in a way it was.
Well, Kathryn, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. We learned a lot about Charles Dickens and the Christmas Carol and all this fun stuff, so thank you very much.